everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum's Artifact Video Series. My name is Ryan Duffy, and I'm the director of the museum, and this week we're going to talk about one of Batavia's other prominent women, and maybe most notorious, and that is Edna Gruber. Now, Edna Gruber's story does not begin in Batavia, but she eventually makes her way to the city in the 1920s. Though we believe she lived farther out towards Buffalo, and we know that she came to Batavia from East Pembroke. Now, Edna's life was a very difficult one, basically through its entirety, but until she became a wealthy businesswoman, she went through many trials and turmoil. She married her first husband, Joseph or Pete Gruber, in 1907 in Buffalo, but they soon divorced, and she was left with a child. Now, Pete Gruber, as he was known, actually was known as Rattlesnake Pete, and had a rattlesnake shop and saloon in Rochester, where he actually had live snakes and was known as a well-known snake hunter. But Edna soon departed from Pete and eventually made her way to East Pembroke. And while in East Pembroke, she lived at the Grandview Hotel. Now, Edna would marry again to a Arthur Reeves in 1930, though again, this marriage would not last long and they would divorce. Arthur would actually meet a tragic end 10 years later while living in Illinois when he was struck and killed by an automobile. By the time that Edna reaches Batavia, she actually rents a large house on Jackson Street just south of where the railroad tracks were, and opens up a tavern and hotel. Now, this building had served that purpose for many years previously and had actually been vacant until Edna purchases the building in 1926. The hotel was known as the Central Hotel previously, and for some time while Edna owned it, but she renamed it to the Palace Hotel. So if looking back in history, you'll see both names used almost interchangeably. Now, the true purpose of the Palace Hotel was not very apparent to outsiders looking in, unless they frequented the establishment. The Palace Hotel was actually a house of ill repute and was really the center of the red light district in Batavia, centered around the railroad stations. Edna was very savvy when it came to this business and was able to work her way around the law and public opinion very well. She would often write into the Daily News of the visitors that came for lunch and such to the hotel, which were actually her new workers that were coming in. And during Prohibition, Edna's establishment would be raided many times, and she would be fined several times and often paid over $1,000 in fines in some years, as she would be raided for having a disorderly house, as it was called at the time. Though it seems that many of those who were to uphold the law and prosecute the law were often visitors of her establishment, so she was able to avoid any serious repercussions, as the information that she knew about certain individuals could be used against them. She also expanded into other areas of investments, though not all of them are known, but we do know that she actually bought a roller skating rink out on East Main Street Road and opened that up, so she was a very savvy businesswoman outside of her initial business. But Edna is not just known as a businesswoman and Batavia's most famous madam. She is also known as a very charitable person and gave to many worthy causes. In fact, that's why I'm standing in front of this giant mirror here, which actually came from the Richmond Mansion. At the time of Edna's business, the mansion was actually used as the county children's home, and Edna was a very big supporter of the efforts there and gave many gifts and donations to the children's home over the years. She would often buy clothes for the kids there or small toys, and they would often fancy their new clothes in front of this giant mirror, which was in the front hallway of the home. She also gave clothes for First Communion to the children at St. Anthony's Church, and also was an animal lover and took in many dogs in particular and would pay for their vet bills, either strays or family pets of maybe homes that could not afford to pay the veterinarian bills. Edna would cover that. So we have one side of Edna basically running a house of ill repute, and then we have the other side of Edna, who was maybe one of the most charitable people in Batavia at the time. Now, Edna's run at the Palace Hotel would come to an end in 1941 when she became a marked woman by the retiring police chief, John J. Casey, who made it his goal before he retired to close down the Palace Hotel and get rid of Edna for good. Day after day, at least 2 policemen were stationed outside the hotel and watched for any patrons that were coming in and out. And eventually they were able to corner a couple gentlemen from out of town who were willing to testify against Edna on what went on inside the Palace Hotel. In February 1941, she was brought before Judge Cohn, and she was given a year in prison and was told to never return to Batavia again. However, the second part of that indictment didn't really stick, as she soon returned to Batavia after her prison term and lived on Jackson Street again, though did not open up a successor to the Palace Hotel. And she actually lived in Batavia until she died in 1953. Now, Edna's adult life continued to have some tragedy as her lone daughter, Florence, actually died in 1936 in her home in Ohio, and Edna actually took in Florence's kids, and they stayed at the Palace Hotel with their grandmother. Now, Edna Gruber is maybe one of the most notorious figures in Batavia's history, and really has 2 different sides, and depending on which side you focus on, can change your opinion of her greatly. But we must admit that she was a very savvy businesswoman who took control of her own life, was actually divorced twice, and supported herself for many years, and actually grew a pretty well-known business and became a rather wealthy woman. We even have pictures of her wearing a full-length fur coat, so she often dressed the part as well as Madam. But Batavia's history is not the same unless we mention Edna Gruber within it. So I hope you enjoyed this edition of our Artifact video series. In case you've missed any in the past, you can go to our YouTube channel, Holland Office Museum, and check out all 40 plus of them that we've done already. And we hope that you stick with us in the future as we're going to continue to do these and put out new videos on different topics.